I helped him become an outstanding scholar. He wanted to marry me. By the time he came back looking for me, I had already started a family of my own. On a mild spring day, the crabapple trees in the Wen family's courtyard were in full bloom, scattering a carpet of delicate pink and white petals across the ground. Sitting on the veranda, I was sewing a plain brocade robe for my husband, Wen Jiyu, while the soft babbling of children drifted from inside the house. Life was so peaceful. Not a ripple disturbed the quiet flow of time. 3 years have passed since I married into the Wen family, and I have long since shed my former sharp edges, becoming the most contented woman in the ordinary streets. My husband, Wen Jiyu, is gentle and kind-hearted, always mindful of his duties. Though he is merely a scholar of humble origins, he is sensitive to others' needs and full of compassion. My mother-in-law, Lady Lu, is kind-hearted and has never treated me harshly. She manages the household affairs with impeccable order. Our young son is well-behaved and bright, and our family lives in harmony, enjoying peace and stability year after year. I had believed that the rest of my life would continue in this quiet, uneventful manner, free from turmoil, until my days were done. But today, news from the capital suddenly shattered my peaceful, ordinary life, forcing an old connection, one that had lain dormant for years, back into the forefront of my mind. Suddenly, a commotion erupted at the end of the alley. The clatter of carriages and horses mingled with the murmur of conversation, shattering the quiet of the entire street. Neighbors poured out to the roadside to gawk, their remarks filled with astonishment and envy. Have you heard? This year's top scholar in the imperial examinations is a poor student from our very own hometown. It's Zhuang Chuxing, that boy who was once so destitute he couldn't even afford ink and paper. He's truly risen to greatness overnight and made a name for himself throughout the capital. I still remember how he looked back when he was down on his luck, ragged clothes, barely able to put food on the table. Who could have imagined that today he'd become the top scholar and receive his title directly from His Majesty? Zhuang Chuxing. The moment those 3 words reached my ears, my hand froze mid-stitch. The silver needle pricked my fingertip, and a tiny drop of bright red blood seeped out, only to be instantly absorbed by the pure white fabric. After 3 years, this name, which I had deliberately pushed to the back of my mind, has finally come back to me. While others only know that Zhuang Chuxing is a prodigy who rose from humble beginnings, no one realizes that this rising star who has suddenly made it to the top was nurtured and carefully cultivated by me, Jiang Ningji, over the course of several years, and that I was the one who helped him rise to greatness, step by step. In the late autumn of that year, I happened to come across Zhuang Chuxing, who was living on the streets. At that time, having lost both parents and bullied by his clan, he had been stripped of his meager ancestral inheritance. Alone and adrift in the city, his clothes were tattered and he was gaunt and emaciated. Yet he could not hide the clarity and pride that shone in his eyes. He crouched outside a bookstore, gazing at the classics on the shelves for a long time, unwilling to leave. In his eyes was an intense, pure, and unwavering thirst for poetry and literature. Seeing that he possessed exceptional natural talent and a tenacious spirit, truly a promising young Mani felt a sudden urge to nurture his potential. At the time, I was still unmarried and had some private assets left to me by my mother. So I often gave him money, bought him writing materials and books, and found him a quiet courtyard where he could study in peace. For 3 full years, I spent my own money and devoted all my energy to clearing away every obstacle in his path, protecting him so he could devote himself to his studies without being distracted by the turmoil of the outside world. He bowed to me countless times, his words sincere and his vows unwavering. He said, "Sister Ningji, I, Chuxing, will never forget the kindness you have shown me in this life. When I eventually pass the imperial examinations, I will surely present you with a 10-ma-long procession of wedding gifts and have you carried home in a palanquin borne by 8 men. In this life, you alone are my one and only. I will never betray your trust, never take a concubine, and never let you down." The vows of youth, every word burning with passion, ringing out with conviction. When others heard of this, they all said that we were soulmates in these turbulent times, destined for a happy union. They believed that once he had achieved success and returned, our story would become a timeless tale of a talented scholar and his beloved. but only I know the truth. I helped him, supported him, and made things work for him. It had nothing to do with romance or love. What I cherish is his extraordinary talent, and what I admire is his indomitable spirit. I simply could not bear to see such a raw gem go unrecognized in this world. So I acted on impulse to help a scholar from a humble background achieve his lofty ambitions. I never agreed to his proposal, nor did I ever promise him the slightest affection. All talk of marriage was nothing more than his own one-sided obsession. The year he went to the capital to take the imperial examinations, he came to bid farewell in the middle of the night, braving the rain, standing at the door, his eyes stubborn yet earnest. He vowed once more that once he had achieved success and retired, he would return with a grand wedding procession to ask for her hand in marriage. At the time, I merely advised him in passing to focus on his exams and not let his years of hard study go to waste. I never once addressed the matter of his marriage. A year after he left, my family selected a suitable husband for me. When Jiyu was gentle in nature, of upright character, and humble in his dealings with Others, a rare and fine man, longing for a life of peace and stability. I agreed to the marriage and joined the Wen family. From then on, I devoted myself to cooking and housework, settled into life in the neighborhood, supported my husband, and raised our children, completely severing all ties to the past. I had thought that, as our paths would never cross again, our past connection had come to an end. He would soar through the halls of power, with a bright future ahead, while I would live a quiet, ordinary life in the mundane world. From then on, our paths would diverge, and we would have no further connection. But I never would have imagined that the very first thing he would do upon returning home as the top student in the high school entrance exams, not paying respects to his ancestors or visiting his neighbors, would be to publicly announce his intention to ask for my hand in marriage, with a lavish dowry, and to wed me, Jiang Ningji. The buzz in the streets and alleys grew louder and louder, with everyone talking about this sensational match. Zhuang, the top scholar, has shown his gratitude and remained true to his original intention. She truly is going to marry Miss Jiang. Back then, everyone was hoping for this marriage. Now that he's become the top scholar, his wish has finally come true. Miss Jiang is truly blessed. She raised a top scholar with her own hands. From now on, she'll be a first-rank noble lady, enjoying endless wealth and glory. The shrill praise rang out one after another, but I felt nothing but absurdity. My heart filled with a cold, calm stillness. Good fortune. I have never sought the wealth and prestige that comes with being the wife of a top-ranking scholar. All I have ever asked for is peace and stability in this life, and the health and happiness of my family. Now, with my children at my side, a caring husband, and a harmonious household, I already have everything I could ever want. No sooner had he achieved success than he set out, driven by his own obsession, to shatter my peace and drag me into the whirlpool of public gossip. A gentle breeze swept through the veranda, and the petals of the crabapple blossoms fluttered down, landing on my collar. The soft sound of a child crying drifted softly from inside the house. My little one had woken up, and that sweet, plaintive cry drew my attention back. I slowly gathered my scattered thoughts, raised my hand to wipe away the tiny drop of blood from my fingertip, and gently folded the brocade robe in my hands, my expression calm and unruffled. My husband, Wen Jiyu, returned from the outer courtyard, walking with a calm and composed air. He must have heard the rumors circulating outside as well. He came to stand beside me, showing not a trace of accusation or resentment, but spoke softly, his tone as gentle as ever. I've heard all the rumors going around. If you're facing any difficulties, there's no need to bear them alone. I am here for you. I looked up at him, my eyes soft and serene, a wave of warmth surging through my heart. Everyone envies Zhuang Chusheng's meteoric rise, and everyone hopes I will curry favor with the powerful and seek a life of luxury. But no one knows that I gave up a marriage to the top scholar, a match envied by all, in exchange for the most precious peace and stability of my life. Zhuang Chusheng, after years of diligent study, you have risen to greatness, with a future full of promise. You should have soared to the heavens and looked down upon the land below. Yet you cling to the past, place your deep affection in the wrong person, and foolishly try to disrupt my perfect life. In that case, I will put an end to this entanglement of the past few years with my own hands. I won't accept. I don't want. And I have no interest in the kind of relationship you're offering as a way to repay a debt of gratitude. No one will ever shake my peaceful life. Not even a bit. The commotion outside raged on for most of the day. And it wasn't until dusk fell and the crowds in the streets and alleys had dispersed that peace finally returned to the Wen family's small courtyard. Chi played with the child in the courtyard, while her mother-in-law, Lady Lu, prepared the evening meal in the kitchen. Each member of the family went about their duties with their usual calm and tranquility, as if the citywide commotion over the top scholar's marriage proposal had never touched this ordinary home. Leaning against the window, I gazed at the serene scene in the courtyard. As a sense of peace settled over me, those long-forgotten memories slowly began to resurface. Everyone is convinced that Zhuang Chuxing and I share a deep and enduring past. Certain that my current quiet life is merely a deliberate act of restraint, waiting for the top scholar to return so I may rise to prominence. Yet they know nothing of the fact that every single act I performed to help Zhuang Chuxing back then was pure and selfless, devoid of even a shred of sordid romantic entanglement. 4 years ago, in late autumn, I was still an unmarried young woman living in our family home. My father had passed away early, leaving only my mother and me to rely on one another. We lived off the modest estate and a small amount of personal savings left by our ancestors. Though our life was comfortable, we never indulged in pride or extravagance, having been immersed in literature since childhood. I held those who were diligent and talented in the highest regard, and could never bear to see a gem left unpolished or a man of talent reduced to poverty. That day, I went to a bookstore outside the city to browse for books. On my way back, as I passed through the dilapidated alley in the southern part of the city, I saw Zhuang Chuxing huddled beneath a crumbling wall. At that moment, the autumn rain was falling in a steady drizzle, and the wind was biting cold. He was wrapped only in a single garment, washed white and covered in patches, shivering uncontrollably from the cold. Yet he clutched a tattered ancient text to his chest, refusing to let go even for a moment. His face was pale and gaunt, his lips cracked and white, yet his eyes shone with a startling intensity, the clear, proud spirit of one who, despite enduring great suffering, refused to bow. At that time, the area was teeming with vagrants and beggars, all looking haggard and dejected as they struggled to survive, but he was different. Though mired in the mud and in rags, he stood tall, his eyes reflecting the grandeur of mountains and rivers and the vastness of the sky. Without a trace of servility or meekness, moved by a sudden sense of pity for his plight, I paused to watch him for quite some time. The maid accompanying me whispered a warning, saying that this down-and-out scholar had no one to rely on. His life was in tatters, and he had nothing to do with us. There was no need to invite trouble. But as I looked at the volume of poetry in his hands, its pages worn from repeated reading and the ink faded, I simply could not bring myself to turn away. I had my maid fetch some of the provisions and charcoal I carried with me to give him. It was meant to be a simple act of kindness, but to my surprise, he rose solemnly, bowed deeply to me, and thanked me with perfect courtesy and a sincere expression. His speech was clear and well organized, his manner refined. Though he lived in poverty, his character and integrity far surpassed those of ordinary townspeople. In just a few words, I knew this man was no ordinary person. Given the right opportunity, he would surely rise to great heights. It was that single glance that made me resolve to do everything in my power to help him. In the days that followed, I frequently sent people to deliver rice, firewood, and clothing to that dilapidated alley in the southern part of the city. I also used my own money to purchase a complete set of writing implements, brushes, ink, paper, and inkstances, as well as the 4 great categories of Chinese literature: the classics, histories, philosophical works, and miscellaneous writings. Since he had no place to call home, I found a secluded and tranquil courtyard for him, paid the rent for the entire year in advance, and allowed him to live far from the clamor of the city, devoting himself to his studies without having to worry about the necessities of life. I never made a point of approaching him, nor did I ever meet with him alone. All the aid I provided was delivered through my maids and servants. Occasionally, he would send a thank you letter through an intermediary. The handwriting was neat and dignified, the tone humble and courteous, and every sentence expressed gratitude for the opportunity to study. There was never a single word that was ambiguous or crossed the line. For the first 6 months, we maintained a clear distinction between benefactor and student. I provided him with support, and he devoted himself to his studies, nothing more. The incident occurred just as the depths of winter were setting in. He had studied so hard that he fell ill from overwork. He caught a chill, developed a high fever that would not subside, and, left all alone with no one to care for him, nearly lost his life. When I heard the news, I could not rest easy, so I personally brought a doctor and some medicinal decoctions to visit him. That was the first time I had truly spent time with him up close. Lying on his sick bed, he was pale and frail, yet when he saw me, he forced himself to sit up and bow, his eyes burning with intensity and determination. That day, for the first time, he made a vow of marriage to me. He said, "While everyone in this world looks down on me for my poverty and misfortune, you alone have shown me kindness, giving me new hope and bringing light into my life. This kindness weighs heavier than Mount Tai, and I have no way to repay you except by pledging my life to you. Once I pass the imperial examinations, I will marry you with the greatest honor and ceremony. For the rest of my life, I will be yours alone, and I will never let you down." When I heard this, I simply shook my head and tried to reason with him. I told him that I was helping him because I valued his talent and respected his integrity. I sought no reward, nor did I expect him to pledge his life to me. All he needed to do was devote himself to his studies, live up to his natural gifts, and make the most of his years of hard study. That would be the best reward of all. I was crystal clear in every word, drawing a clear line, and never gave him the slightest false hope. But that young man, trapped in a desperate situation and having received this timely help, had long since come to see me as his sole salvation in life. My open-hearted kindness, in his eyes, had become a veiled expression of deep affection. From that moment on, his feelings toward me changed completely. He continued to devote himself to his studies, making rapid progress. Yet every time he saw me, his eyes betrayed an unmistakable obsession and admiration. He would copy poetry collections by hand to give me, stand outside the courtyard waiting on snowy nights, and carefully save his meager rations to give to me. His devotion was sincere, passionate, and unwavering. I politely but firmly turned him down on several occasions, repeatedly telling him not to get his hopes up. I explained that romantic love between men and women is the most fleeting of things, and that my support for him stemmed purely from a desire to nurture his talent. It had nothing to do with romance. Yet he had already set his heart on me. No matter how I tried to dissuade him, he remained steadfast in his resolve, insisting that he would marry no one but me for the rest of his life. Seeing his sincere devotion, and knowing that I had gone out of my way to help him year after year, the neighbors and villagers were unaware that I had repeatedly drawn clear boundaries between us. They simply assumed we were mutually in love, quietly awaiting our wedding day. Rumors gradually spread, and everyone said that I, the young lady of the Jiang family, had fallen for a scholar from a humble background and was waiting for him to pass the imperial examinations. I have always been a calm and composed person. I am not afraid of rumors, but I am too lazy to keep defending myself. The truth will out. I know I have acted with integrity and have a clear conscience, so I leave it to others to judge. Over the course of 3 years of hard study, I watched him transform from a man in dire straits, struggling to get by, into a man of profound learning and remarkable poise. His talent grew more outstanding with each passing day, and his horizons broadened day by day. Yet his obsession with me only grew deeper. Day after day, the night before he left for the capital to take the imperial examinations, he braved the rain to come and bid me farewell. It was pouring heavily that night. He stood outside my door, his clothes completely soaked, yet his eyes shone with an astonishing intensity. His words were firm and resolute as he vowed that upon his return, he would marry me. His tone was so certain that it brooked no argument. I still only gently urged him to take the exam with peace of mind, reminding him that his future was what mattered most. I deliberately kept my distance. I didn't see him off, nor did I exchange any private words with him. I simply wanted him to set off for the capital and pursue his future. As time went on, the entanglements of the past would naturally fade away. I had thought that, having experienced all the splendor of the capital and witnessed the myriad facets of life, he would, once he had achieved success and fame, come to see through the obsessions of his youth and let go of those meaningless ties. With high office and great wealth in his grasp, and surrounded by noble ladies, he would surely realize that the naive vows of those days were nothing more than a fleeting sentiment born of desperation and could hardly be considered true, deep affection. So, the year after he arrived in the capital, I calmly accepted my family's arrangement and agreed to marry Wen Jiu. Wen Jiu is gentle and kind-hearted. With a pure soul, he is unassuming and content to stay true to himself. He appreciates the value of simple, everyday life and understands how rare true peace of mind is. He treats me with the utmost care, respects my past, and is sensitive to my feelings. Marrying him is not a compromise. It is the home I've always wanted. A choice I've made after careful consideration. I severed all ties to the past, shed my maiden identity, became a wife and a mother, and lived a quiet, steady life. I thought those old matters had long been buried, and that our debts of gratitude had been settled. I helped him rise to the top, and he gave me peace of mind and no regrets. From then on, our paths diverged, and we each found our own happiness. I never imagined he would be so obsessed. The moment he passed the imperial examinations with top honors and returned home in finery, the very first thing he did was proclaim his long-held obsession to the world, foolishly hoping that by invoking a debt of gratitude and vows known to all, he could force me to abandon my husband and child and return to him. The evening breeze blew in through the window, causing the window panes to rattle softly and bringing my scattered thoughts back to reality. The children's laughter in the courtyard was soft and clear, and Jiu's voice as she gently coaxed and teased them was warm and gentle. These peaceful days are the tranquility I've longed for all these years. Zhuang Chuxing, having achieved your ambition and risen to the highest ranks of the imperial court, you should have had a bright future ahead of you, free from worries. Yet you insist on being trapped by old notions, clinging to illusions, and determined to shatter my perfection. Since that is the case, I will make you see clearly that the affection you have clung to for half your life has always been nothing more than your own delusion. At the first light of dawn the next day, the sound of carriages and horses moving in orderly, solemn procession could be heard outside the gates of the Wen residence. I had just finished dressing my son and entrusted him to my mother-in-law's care when the commotion outside the courtyard gate grew louder. Unlike yesterday's casual chatter among the neighbors, today's procession of carriages and horses was orderly and imposing. With the soft clang of gongs and drums of grandeur unique to the court's new elite, the entire street fell silent, awed by the solemn grandeur of the occasion. I didn't need anyone to tell me. I knew it was Zhuang Chuxing who had arrived. Ji was leafing through a book at his desk when he heard the sound. He looked up, his expression as gentle and unruffled as ever, without a trace of unease or anger. He set the book aside, stood up, and turned to me, saying softly, "If you do not wish to see him, I will refuse on your behalf and protect the peace of our household." I raised my hand to smooth out my collar, shook my head impassively, and said, "No need. What must come will come. There's no escaping it. I'll go see him myself. If I simply keep evade, it will only give others grounds to suspect I have something to hide, and make them think I harbor regrets or cannot let go of the past. I act with integrity. I have nothing to be ashamed of regarding my past, my husband, or these peaceful years. Why should I hide?" I walked slowly out of the main house and stood in the middle of the courtyard. The servant slowly pushed open the main door, and blinding morning light streamed in through the crack, revealing a tall, striking figure. Zhuang Chuxing stood tall as a pine tree, clad in a crimson scholar official robe, his waist cinched with a jade sash, and his jet-black hair tied high. In just a few short years, the once impoverished youth from a humble family who had once been destitute and weather-beaten had undergone a complete transformation. Today, his features radiated nobility, his bearing was commanding, and he exuded an air of dignity forged in the halls of the imperial court. Every gesture and movement spoke of the brilliance of a chosen son of heaven. Not a trace remained of his former wretched and humble self. He was followed by his attendant, Swayan, with a procession of government officials flanking him on either side. A scene marked by impeccable etiquette and great pomp. The residents of the entire street had gathered at the entrance, holding their breath as they waited to witness this timeless tale of a top imperial exam graduate seeking a bride. Chuang Chushing's gaze swept past the courtyard gate and landed squarely on me. It was intense and burning, filled with an obsession that had remained unchanged for years, as well as a hint of unwavering certainty, as if he were convinced that I would surely be grateful for his past kindness, abandon my family to follow him, and rush toward the glory and splendor that everyone envied. He stepped into our courtyard, radiating glory and untouched by the mundane concerns of everyday life. In my simple, ordinary little courtyard, he seemed completely out of place. Swayan stepped forward and spoke in a loud, clear voice, his words echoing through the streets. My son, the top scholar, is deeply grateful to Miss Jiang for her kindness in nurturing him in the past. Years ago, he vowed that once his name appeared on the golden list of successful candidates, he would return to ask for her hand in marriage. Now that he has achieved this distinction, he has come to your door bearing generous gifts, earnestly pleading with Miss Jiang to honor this old promise. As soon as the words were spoken, a commotion broke out at the entrance to the alley. Everyone was waiting for my response, waiting for me to agree with tears in my eyes, waiting for this heartwarming tale of a talented young man repaying a debt of gratitude to come to a happy conclusion. Chuang Chushing raised his hand slightly, silencing the sounds around him. He fixed me with an intense gaze, his tone shedding the solemnity of the imperial court and taking on a touch of the sincerity and gentleness unique to youth. Ningji, I'm back. He walked slowly toward me, stopping 2 steps away, a respectful distance. Yet his determination was unwavering. For the past 3 years, I have never forgotten your kindness, day or night. As I studied tirelessly and pressed forward step by step, the only thing that sustained me through countless lonely nights was the promise I made to you back then. Now that I have achieved success and hold a position of power, I have the ability to ensure you live a life free from worry and grant you the greatest splendor the world has to offer. His voice was clear and resonant, and every word he spoke was heartfelt, conveying an irresistible sincerity. Every word of my vow from back then was true. I am willing to present you with 10 miles of wedding gifts and follow the 3 letters and 6 rights to marry you into my family. In this life, you shall be my only wife. I will take no other woman, keep no concubines, and have no mistresses. For the rest of our lives, I will give you all my achievements, my future, and my wealth and glory. The people around them sighed softly, all filled with envy. No woman in the world could resist such deep affection and such an honor. Who wouldn't long to be cherished by the top scholar and be the sole object of his affection for a lifetime? Yet as I listened to these touching words, my heart remained completely unmoved, leaving only a sense of clear calm. I looked at the strikingly handsome new top scholar standing before me, speaking calmly and clearly, with neither arrogance nor subservience. I publicly dashed all his hopes. Minister Zhuang, thank you for cherishing the past and remembering those bygone days. But those matters are long gone with the wind. The so-called old promises have always been nothing more than your own fixation. I never agreed to a single one of them. The tenderness in Zhuang Chushing's eyes suddenly froze. He furrowed his brow slightly, and a look of disbelief flashed across his face. Before he could speak, I continued in a slow, steady voice, my clear words echoing throughout the courtyard and down the entire street. Back then, when I helped you pursue your studies, I admired your natural talent and took pity on your plight. It was purely out of the goodness of my heart, with no romantic feelings involved, and certainly no thoughts of marriage. I helped you so that you might achieve greatness. I never expected you to pledge your life to me, nor did I ever hope that you would return after achieving success to marry me. You spent 3 years studying hard and finally passed the imperial examination. This is the result of your own exceptional talent, diligence, and perseverance. What I did was merely a small gesture to help clear away some of the mundane hardships in your life. It was no great favor, and it certainly doesn't warrant you binding yourself to me for life through marriage or tormenting yourself with obsession for half your life. I looked up and met his gaze, my eyes open and resolute. without a hint of evasion. It has now been 3 years since I married into the Wen family. My husband is thoughtful, my mother-in-law is kind, and my young son is well-behaved. Our family lives in harmony, and our days are peaceful. As a wife and mother, I have faithfully fulfilled my wifely duties, and with our family living in harmony, my life is already complete and without regret. The so-called lavish wedding procession, the title of first-rank noble consort, and all the world's splendor. While these may be the highest honors to others, to me, Jiang Ningji, they are nothing but a superfluous burden. Not worth a single penny. What I have always sought is not boundless wealth and power, but simply an ordinary, down-to-earth life, with peace and safety year after year. As soon as the words were spoken, the room fell instantly silent. All the envious, expectant, and approving glances froze in their tracks. No one had expected me to be so decisive in publicly rejecting the top scholar's deep affection and the glory that came with it. Zhuang Chuxing's expression darkened gradually, the sincerity in his eyes giving way to intense resentment and panic. He took a step forward, his voice growing slightly deeper, tinged with a barely perceptible note of obsession. Ning Zhizhi, you are by no means one to settle for a mundane, ordinary life. Back then, you had such broad horizons, a mind full of grand visions, and a heart filled with righteousness. How could you possibly be content to be confined to a tiny courtyard, spending your days and nights preoccupied with the mundane? The humble abode of the Wen family, how could it ever be worthy of you? Whether I'm worthy or not is up to me. I interrupted him calmly, my tone firm and leaving no room for argument. Where my heart leads is the best place for me to be. I have everything I desire now, and my heart is at peace. I need no pity from you, Your Excellency, nor do I need you to repay me with your life. Let us put our past debts of gratitude behind us. I asked for nothing in return for my past assistance, and I will certainly not trade it today for even a shred of your pity or glory. I implore you, Magistrate Zhuang, to let go of your obsession, pursue your bright future, and cease disturbing the peace of my household. I bowed slightly, considering the matter settled once and for all. From now on, our ties are severed, and we shall never meet again. Zhuang Chuxing stared at me intently, the light in his eyes gradually fading, replaced by a deep gloom and stubbornness, with the words our ties are severed. We shall never meet again. I put an end to Zhuang Chuxing's hopes and stunned all the onlookers gathered at the alley entrance. Outside the courtyard, it was deathly quiet, so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Everyone assumed that once the newly crowned top scholar had traveled 1,000 miles home to ask for my hand in marriage, only to be politely rebuffed by me in public, the matter would end there. He would save face and set off for a promising career in the imperial court, while I would settle into a peaceful life at home, tending to my family's daily affairs. We would each go our separate ways, never to cross paths again. But deep down, I knew that Zhuang Chuxing had always been stubborn, extreme, and inflexible. He clawed his way out of a desperate, muddy abyss. I was the only glimmer of light he ever grasped during his darkest days. The sole obsession that sustained him through years of arduous study. Such a deep-seated attachment, one that runs through his very bones, cannot be easily severed by a few harsh words from me. Today's public rejection has not only humiliated him but also shattered the emotional anchor he's clung to. Oh, for years. He will certainly not let this go. Just as I expected. Long after I had finished speaking, Zhuang Chuxing remained standing where he was. His crimson official robe glowed brightly in the morning light. Yet it only served to make his expression appear even more somber and gloomy. The last vestige of warmth and sincerity in his eyes had completely faded, replaced by deep-seated restraint, resentment, and a touch of stubbornness bordering on obsession. He didn't fly into a rage or try to force me with words. He simply gazed at me intently, his eyes heavy, as if he were trying to etch my current composed and resolute expression deep into his heart. Jiang Ningji, are you really? Leaving absolutely no room for compromise. His voice was no longer the gentle, earnest tone it had been moments before. Instead, it carried a low, hoarse timbre, betraying the helplessness that comes from having one's faith utterly shattered, as well as a stubborn refusal to accept his fate. I stood tall and straight, My expression calm and composed. My tone as firm and resolute as ever. Without the slightest wavering. Minister Zhuang. I am already a wife and a mother. I have always fulfilled my duties and found my place in life. Whether by emotion or reason, by custom or morality, it is impossible for me to abandon my family and choose another. Your obsession is your own affair. There is no need for it to bind us both for the rest of our lives, nor is there any need for it to disturb the peace of my household. Okay. After a long silence, he slowly uttered a single word, each syllable heavy with an overwhelming sense of despair. I won't pressure you to give an answer today. I'll give you some time to think it over carefully. After saying this, he gave me a long, penetrating look, said no more, and turned to walk away. His upright figure remained as straight as ever, yet it betrayed an unmistakable sense of desolation and loneliness. The honor guard followed close behind, withdrawing in perfect order. The earlier imposing spectacle faded away, leaving only silence in the alley and the intermittent murmurs and whispers of the onlookers. The neighbors were abuzz with speculation. Some lamented my foolishness, saying I had turned down a title of top scholar prize within my grasp and clung stubbornly to my humble, commoner roots. Others praised my loyalty and propriety, noting that I had married and followed my husband's lead without bowing to the allure of wealth and prestige. Still others secretly suspected that I was merely putting on airs and would surely come to regret my decision one day. I paid him no mind at all, turned and walked back into the courtyard, closed the gate, and shut out all the outside commotion and gossip. My husband, Wen Jiyu, stood quietly by my side the entire time, never interjecting or interrupting, silently watching as I resolved this entanglement. Only when I turned around did he walk slowly toward me, raising his hand to gently brush away the dust that had settled on my shoulder. His tone remained as gentle as ever, without a trace of reproach, suspicion, or displeasure. You must be tired. Come inside and rest. He never pry into my past, never questions my decisions, and certainly never harbors the slightest resentment toward me because of outside gossip. He is perceptive and gentle, fully aware that I act with integrity and have a pure heart, and is never blinded by superficial glamour. I looked up at him, feeling a deep sense of warmth wash over me, and gave a slight nod. But I knew deep down that the turmoil had only just begun. Over the next few days, the mood in the city began to shift. At first, it was merely idle chatter among the common folk in the streets and alleys. But gradually, many local gentry and officials began paying him visits, some under the pretext of paying a call to offer subtle advice, while others hinted at the pros and cons in a roundabout way. Everyone feels sorry for me. Madame Jiang. Zhuang, the top scholar, is currently in high favor with the emperor. He is young and accomplished, with a future full of promise. You devoted yourself to nurturing him all those years ago. That was a tremendous stroke of fate. Why cling to this humble home and let such a golden opportunity slip away? For a woman, a life of prosperity and security is what matters most. Though Mr. Wen is a fine man, he is, after all, merely a commoner with no prospects for a government career and modest means. How could he possibly ensure you live a life of splendor? Lord Zhuang is a man of deep loyalty and strong convictions. If you'll just give in, you'll have a first-rank noble title within your grasp and a lifetime of wealth and comfort, a blessing that so many women long for but can never attain. These words may seem like well-meaning advice, but in reality, every word cuts deep and amounts to subtle pressure. They were all awed by Zhuang Chusheng's status and reputation. They saw only his power and wealth, and thought I was ungrateful and didn't know how to appreciate what I had, completely disregarding the fact that I already had a family and that we were all living in peace and contentment. Not only that, but although Zhuang Chusheng had not paid another personal visit, he had already quietly leveraged his connections and influence to subtly test the waters and apply pressure. First, the private academy where my husband, Wen Jiyu, earned his living was suddenly shut down by the authorities on the pretext of rectifying academic standards and inspecting the premises. Wen Jiyu has always been law-abiding and meticulous in his teaching, never having committed the slightest misstep. This sudden inspection was clearly the result of someone's deliberate scheming. Soon after, Many merchants and neighbors in the town who had previously had dealings with the Wen family began to deliberately distance themselves from us and avoid us. Neighbors who had once gotten along harmoniously would now go out of their way to avoid our family when they saw us, offering only perfunctory greetings and acting deliberately aloof. Mother-in-law Lu was a gentle soul who had always been modest and kind to others. She had never before experienced such coldness from others or faced such social ostracism. In just a few short days, the house had grown cold and desolate. The lively atmosphere of neighbors chatting and visiting one another had vanished entirely, and an oppressive, stifling atmosphere pervaded every corner of the estate. By lamplight that night, the grandmother gazed at her sleeping grandson and sighed softly, her voice tinged with resignation and worry. "Ningji, I know you are steadfast and true to yourself, but Zhuang, the top scholar, now holds great power and is deliberately putting pressure on us. We are mere commoners from a humble family. We simply have no way to stand up to him. If this continues, I fear it will affect Zhiyu's future and our son's prospects. I know my mother-in-law isn't trying to persuade me to remarry. She's simply worried about the family's well-being and concerned that my innocent relatives might suffer needlessly because of my past. My mind is clear, yet I harbor not a shred of resentment." That was exactly what Zhuang Chuxing had in mind. Knowing that I was strong-willed and impervious to superficial glamour, he stopped trying to tempt me with wealth and prestige, and instead resorted to the most practical, worldly pressures to force me to compromise. He knew I valued my family above all else and cherished stability, so he deliberately targeted the Wen family, cutting off my husband's livelihood and isolating my entire household. He hoped to wear me down under endless pressure and hardship, forcing me to abandon my current life and return to him of my own accord. He never thought he was in the wrong. On the contrary, he believed he was acting out of deep devotion and a desire to repay a debt of gratitude. He fancied that by forcing me to leave my humble, commoner background, he could ensure a life of luxury and splendor for me. Yet he failed to realize that his relentless pressure had long since become an unreasonable burden that disrupted my peace of mind. The only one he ever moved was himself. That night, my husband, Wen Zhiyu, took my hand and spoke gently. "You need not feel any burden, nor should you feel guilty about the upheaval in our family. The ebb and flow of life, and the warmth and coldness of human relationships, are simply the way of the world. If the private school closes, we'll simply take a break. It can always reopen in the future. If others grow distant, we'll simply cherish our own time together. I may not be able to grant you the world's riches and honors, but I will certainly protect you and our child, ensuring a lifetime of peace and security, free from the pressures of any storm." His eyes were open and gentle, without a trace of resentment, filled only with tolerance and resolve. At that moment, I became even more convinced that the choice I made back then was the right one. Zhuang Chuxing offered me the superficial glamour and prestige that everyone envies, a life of uncertainty and unpredictable loyalties, whereas Wen Zhiyu gave me a steady, deep-rooted sense of security, a love that flows gently and takes root, staying by my side year after year, never leaving me. It's clear which is more important. Zhuang Chuxing thought that by wielding his power and applying pressure at every turn, he could force me to back down and compromise. But he didn't know that what I, Jiang Ning, fear least is pressure and coercion. If I can lift him out of the mire and into the clouds with my own hands, I can also sever all his delusions and protect my entire family. So what if there's a scandal? So what if they try to pressure us? My peaceful life has never depended on the charity of others, nor can anyone take it away at will. I looked up at the deep darkness outside the window, my eyes cold and resolute. "Zhuang Chuxing, if you insist on pressing me further, I will meet every challenge head-on. If you try to undermine the peace and stability of my homeland, I will shatter your self-righteousness and the obsession that has consumed half your life. Starting today, I will not give an inch in this battle." Zhuang Chuxing's relentless behind-the-scenes pressure over the past few days had plunged the Wen family into distress. Rumors were swirling through the streets and alleys, laying bare the true nature of those around us. My husband's private school had been shut down. Our neighbors were deliberately keeping their distance, and the entire family was caught up in an invisible web of pressure, leaving the atmosphere oppressive. Everyone assumed that sooner or later, I would be unable to withstand the pressure, give in, and accommodate his obsession. But he never understood that what I feared most was never poverty or societal pressure, but rather the disruption of my peace and the distress of my family. He thought that his relentless pressure was a sign of deep affection and a way to repay a debt of gratitude. But in reality, it was nothing more than selfishness and obsession, using past favors and his current power to recklessly disrupt my life, not wanting my family to suffer needlessly because of my past. I sent a messenger to arrange a meeting with Zhuang Chuxing at an old courtyard on the outskirts of the city. That small courtyard was the very place I had arranged for him all those years ago, so he could devote himself to his studies, having witnessed every detail of my support for him. It was the perfect place to put an end to all our entanglements once and for all. The following afternoon, I went alone to the old courtyard. The gate was still weathered and mottled, and the courtyard was overgrown with weeds and plants, having been neglected for years. It was no longer the neat and orderly place it once was, yet traces of the past remained everywhere. Zhuang Chuxing had been waiting here for some time. He had shed his official robes and was now dressed in plain civilian clothes. The stern authority of the imperial court had faded, replaced by the quiet solitude and cold detachment of his youth. Hearing footsteps, he turned abruptly, his gaze settling on me as intense obsession and suppressed emotion surged forth. It had been a few days since I'd last seen him, and the despondency in his eyes had deepened. Yet his tone still carried a stubborn refusal to give up. Have you come to your senses? I stood quietly in the courtyard, my expression calm and composed. Without a hint of evasion, I got straight to the point. I've come here today not to compromise, but to settle this once and for all. His body stiffened slightly, the light in his eyes dimmed instantly, and his brows knitted tightly together, betraying his deep sense of resentment. Before he could speak, I spoke slowly, each word clear and distinct, cutting through all that had come before and shattering the illusion of self-pity he had nurtured for so many years. Zhuang Chuxing, there's one thing you've always misunderstood. Back then, when I did everything in my power to help you, there wasn't a shred of romantic sentiment involved. I admired your talent and pitied your background. I simply couldn't bear to see such a gem left to gather dust. It was an act of genuine kindness from the bottom of my heart. It had absolutely nothing to do with romantic feelings for you. When you were in dire straits and no one came to your aid, I was the only one who reached out to help you. Yet you mistook this act of kindness in your hour of need for romantic affection. During those long nights of diligent study, you made marrying me your sole obsession, mistaking gratitude for love, lost in your own delusions and self-pity. You trapped yourself and disrupted my life. His lips trembled slightly as he whispered in protest. If you had no feelings for me, why would you have stood by me for 3 years, spending every last penny of your own money to help me reach the top? I glanced back at him calmly, my tone frank and resolute. I helped you out of respect for your unwavering integrity and indomitable spirit. Though you were destitute at the time, you never compromised your scholarly principles or succumbed to a life of compromise. I was helping a poor scholar with lofty aspirations, not because I was infatuated with you as a person. I have never given you the slightest hope of romance, nor have I ever agreed to your proposal. Time and again, I have politely declined and drawn clear boundaries. Yet you chose to turn a blind eye and cling to your delusions. The rumors of a talented scholar and a beautiful maiden, or of deep, soulful companionship, are nothing more than an illusion you created to satisfy your own sense of fulfillment. I watched the layers of shattered emotion in his eyes and continued to expose his selfish motives in a cold tone. You are now pressuring me at every turn, undermining my husband's livelihood, and isolating my entire family, while you appear to be acting out of deep affection to force me into compliance. Your true motive is selfishness. You cannot bear that your years of obsession have come to naught. You cannot bear that, having achieved fame and success, there is no one to match your glory. And above all, you cannot bear that your only salvation already belongs to another. What you've ever wanted wasn't to keep me safe, but to make up for the regrets of your youth and earn a reputation as the top scholar who repays a debt of gratitude. The words cut deep, shattering the deep, years-long attachment he had held onto. Zhuang Chuxing turned deathly pale, his body swaying slightly as all the obsession, intensity, and conviction in his eyes crumbled away bit by bit. He stared at me blankly, his throat moving several times, yet he couldn't bring himself to utter a single word in his defense. All those years of self-pity, deep-seated obsession, and solemn vows, it turns out they were nothing but a one-man show from start to finish. After a long silence, his voice was hoarse and dry, tinged with utter despair and desolation. So, it was all just a one-sided fantasy on my part. I nodded slightly, my tone calm and even. Yes, I acknowledge the debt of gratitude. But there is no emotional bond between us. The favor I did you in the past, helping you study hard and achieve success, and guiding you onto the right path, has already been the best repayment. As far as we're concerned, we're even. My family is now harmonious, and my life is peaceful. All I ask is to live an ordinary life. I implore you to let go of all your obsessions. Stop putting undue pressure on me, and go your separate ways from here on out. May we meet again under different skies, without interfering in each other's lives. I bowed my head in a gesture of final closure. Zhuang Chuxing stood motionless, gazing at me. All the radiance had faded from his eyes, leaving only endless desolation and regret. This time, he had finally seen the whole truth, and there was not a trace of coercion or stubbornness left in him. The wind swept through the overgrown weeds in the old courtyard on the outskirts of town, filling the air with a sense of desolation. My heartfelt confession, every word sincere, completely shattered the obsession Zhuang Chuxing had clung to for years. He stood frozen in place, his face ashen. The intense, fanatical glow that had filled his eyes moments before had vanished entirely, leaving only a sense of desolation and loneliness. He remained silent for a long time. His voice was hoarse and dry, stripped of any trace of force or coercion, leaving only an endless sense of despondency. So, it turns out that from the very beginning, I was the only one deluding myself. I remained calm, gave a slight nod, and said no more in my defense. With the facade shattered, any further words would be superfluous. Zhuang Chuxing looked up at me, his eyes reflecting the determination forged through years of arduous study, the will to survive against all odds, and the profound regret of a dream gone unfulfilled. He finally understood that my support back then had stemmed purely from a desire to nurture talent and a sense of goodwill. It had nothing to do with romance. I had never been romantically interested in him, nor had I ever promised to marry him. He kept piling on the pressure, disrupting the peace of my entire family. His so-called gratitude and deep affection were nothing more than a selfish quest for personal fulfillment. My obsession ran too deep, and I disturbed your peace. He slowly lowered his gaze, shedding all traces of arrogance and stubbornness, his eyes filled with remorse. I shouldn't have bound you with a debt of gratitude, nor should I have used my power to coerce the Wen family, dragging innocent people into this. Years of illusion, shattered in an instant. The newly crowned top scholar, once renowned throughout the capital, now stripped of all his glory, is left with nothing but a heart filled with despair and regret. Everything that has happened in the past is my fault. He bowed solemnly with his hands clasped, his demeanor open and honest, having completely let go of the past. From now on, I will not trouble you in the slightest. I will restore peace to the Wen family, and from this day forward, we shall part ways and live our own lives in peace. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned and walked away, his back appearing lonely and resolute. Never looking back, the controversy was finally put to rest. Within 3 days, the mood in the town had completely shifted. The private schools that had been shut down reopened. Estranged neighbors began socializing again, and all the subtle pressure and ostracism vanished without a trace. True to his word, Zhuang Chuxing severed all ties completely, traveled to the capital to take up his post, and there was no further word of him returning home. The Wen family courtyard has returned to its former tranquility and peace. My husband remains as kind and considerate as ever. My mother-in-law is gentle and devoted to the family, and my young son brings joy with his playful antics. Our life is simple and ordinary, yet peaceful year after year. People no longer speak of the legendary tale of the top scholar seeking a bride. Only a few remember that there once was a top scholar from a humble background who, after a lifetime of single-minded devotion, ultimately left the stage in regret. As I sat quietly on the veranda, watching my family live in peace and harmony, my heart felt clear and free of regret. I personally nurtured a scholar of unparalleled talent, helping him achieve his lofty ambitions while preserving my own down-to-earth way of life. I don't seek earth-shattering glory. I only wish for a simple, peaceful life from now on, free from worries year after year.